So, what type of interactive storytelling can we do? We've talked a little bit about it. That's a small example. Yes, I mean, there's all sorts of things. So we haven't got much restriction there. We'll have to choose a genre, we'll have to choose a mode of expression. So those one, for instance, are planning, that's AI planning, so you can have some universal kind of approach to planning. You can have some dynamic kind of planning, so it's a different approach to how you're actually going to code the architectures for the characters, for the story. You can have some plot-based approaches, you can have some character-based approaches. So what we do is very much character-based. And you can focus on generating stories in a way that's sort of like kind of what you tend to do through the interactions. You actually generate stories, or you can look at just authoring stories. That's what the ASAP system is doing. So you do have a lot of approaches, and we focus on the emergent approach there, where we create a story world, we create characters, and the interaction between those characters and the user that generates story. It's easier said than done. And one thing we've learned over the years, and that we haven't quite cracked it yet, and that's why this collaboration is really important, is in order for anything emergent or an emergent narrative to take place, we need a certain mass of character actions, a certain mass of tropes, events, actions, for it to actually start to be emergent. Otherwise, you'd end up doing something that is could look fairly scripted, because you haven't got enough options for the characters to choose between. So ideally, it would be great to have a super collaborative world where everybody could author an agent or some actions and put them all together and see what happens. But there is that element there, so that's why scalability is important. You need to be able to produce enough assets for those things to happen. So, authoring interactive storytelling, is it a new authorial paradigm? I would have said yes 3 years ago, but when I see what other people or some of the people we've met are doing, are actually maybe not that much. When I see what people do in the LARPing community, actually maybe it's not so much of a new authoring paradigm, because there's already some precedents of writers doing something similar. Is it a shift in authoring responsibilities? It might be. In a way, when we're looking at LARPs, even as an actor or an interactor or a player, you do have some authoring responsibilities. You are responsible for what you actually deliver, and you're responsible to interact with the other actors. And like in improv, you're also responsible to give people opportunities. One thing that I thought was very interesting when we did the LARP was you actually do not need so much of a resolution towards the end of your story. What I found very interesting is my character got involved in about 4 or 5 different sub-stories, and not a single one of it was actually resulted in a resolution. I still had a great time, and I was still part of the whole story world, but actually my character didn't achieve anything per se. But it didn't really matter. It was about exploring opportunities and reacting to other people, reacting to other actors. So if you can create intelligent, artificial, and some sort of synthetic actors, then bouncing off those characters can actually be satisfying in itself. Adapting to new narrative environments, I think it is in the context of the digital outlook to interactive storytelling. It's not so much, I think, in the arts. I think in terms of theatre, people have already sort of like done some of this, and that we need to get inspiration from that. In terms of the LARPing community, they're already doing this, and we can take inspiration from that as well. So, look into the sort of like relationships a bit further. You know, we do have the player and the author and the computer. And in terms, when we talk about digital interactive storytelling, I think what we talk about is really that relationship between the player and the computer. Is once the author's done the job, the author is out of the picture, and you've got to trust the system to actually deliver the right kind of interaction for your player. Obviously, you've authored it, so you should be confident that's what it's going to be doing. But if you start to use autonomous agents and autonomous systems, you're going to have to sort of like give some trust to the system and give it some confidence that it's going to deliver something within the realm of what you've designed or what you've had in mind. You very much got the causal chain between the character and the affective state of the character or the player or the user and what's actually happening in the story world, and think about it this way. So something happened in the story world that's going to result into some sort of like emotion modulations or emotional reactions to the player, to characters, and in itself generate some interactions, and it's going to go back to the story world, and you can sort of like take it from there. This is where you need to have enough actions to get things going. So, what we'd like to do in terms of our visions is to make interactive storytelling or intelligent agents, synthetic actors, accessible to talented authors, to get people involved in doing things. We don't want it to be reserved to technical or computer science people. That's the last thing we need. I think, my view on this is I love to write stories. I love to develop my little comic character. I love to do a little bit of drawing and that kind of things. But this is not where my expertise is. So I can play with it, but I would rather have people who do this for a living, who have real expertise into it, getting on board and trying to do those things from that perspective. Because for years and years we had a lot of systems that are presented to conferences, very interesting systems, but the stories are not really, really good. The art is not really, really good because it's a computer scientist who's been doing stuff. That's not really good for dissemination and giving it to a bigger audience. On the other hand, if you're an interested writer and an interesting artist, it might be a way to give a different angle to your work, for instance, as well. So it might be worth doing some mutual benefit in those things. And what I'd like to do is to allow us to tap into the current interactive writing, which we're already very good at, which is the thing that really we got through and understanding through this network. Is the skills are already there, and most of the techniques and approaches are already there. And some people are already really good at it. We just need to find a way to interface with these people to take some of their authoring process and reflect it into our systems. I already got 5 minutes, so you're not going to get a lot of AI stuff from me, I'm afraid. So it's not a very much of a new authorial AI system, but the idea is to develop an author-based IS tool for the development of interactive storytelling environments and characters. And that's Neil's PhD at the moment. So we might have a demo for you at the end of the week. It's supposed to have one for me, so I might have one for you. And a mode of expression for artistic collaborations towards exploration, drama, social communication, and education. I think it's a kind of thing. Really, we can really push it that way as well. So, the reason why we want to do interactive storytelling and synthetic actors is obviously a common aspect in most cases is the character. And, so, what do you need in order to describe, author the character that is believable, interesting, engaged in your narrative experience, and consistent and reliable? The consistent bit is a very important bit. If you start to author through branching, you're going to have to consider so many different options that at some point you're going to lose the plot, and at some point your character is going to make decisions that are not really reflecting what it should be making. Or simple things. if you all probably played games where you go and you meet a character and you say, hi, my name is blah, 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 blah. And 2 minutes later, you walk around, you come back to the same character. Hi, my name is, and you say, okay, right. At least you could have made an effort to sort of like have another line of dialogue or something. But it's to create some intelligent actors, basically. When you come back to that agent who remember that he always met you, but remember the content of the discussions, the content of the actions or the decisions, and go further from that and reflect on that. So we want to do convincing virtual actors for directors to dynamically simulate narrative experience. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details. So what we really do is we tend to build a model of the user in our system. And we simulate and we anticipate the impact of the characters. The idea there is, in our system, each character has its own emotion state, emotion system. So a character will feel. Character has a context, he's going to have an idea of the context, that's what John works on. The idea of a backstory, some personal history, and affects and emotions. So when things happen in the world, either started by a user interacting with something, or by another agent, or by something happening in the world in general, that's going to carry some emotional and affective changes to all the other characters. And basically, having an affect-based agent means that those agents will change their plans, will change their goals, will change their actions, the decisions they make based on how they feel. So theoretically, the way you can develop those things is that if you interact with characters in certain ways, you can change the way they're going to behave, which gives you that emergent aspect of the storytelling. Which means that as an author, you need to offer different things than just how the character is going to feel. So you offer your story world, but you need also to offer some goal library for the characters. So what does the character want them to do, and what do they want to do? So that they do not act out of character in the story. Action libraries, so what actions are available for them to carry out different goals and what they want to do. And some object and properties they can use within the world in order to carry out these things. So that's a slightly different sort of like propositions in how you're going to offer your character. And really, this is where the focus sort of like needs to be between the transition between authoring and the computer, and being reliably confident that what the computer is going to deliver is more or less what you've sort of like designed for the project. So I'm going to jump to some slides because I've got lots of those. So yeah, really it's between the end user interaction and the runtime developing engine that you want your creative people to be able to offer. That's easier said than done, because that gets really, really technical. And that gets really, really conceptual. And in between the two, you need to find ways to facilitate. And that's very, very complicated. Neil's approach is to use some level of intelligent narrative feedback, where you develop, author a story, the system runs some simulations, and sort of like come back to you and tell you, what, okay, this is not working, this is working, this is not working. You've got a dead end there, you're missing an action there, and that kind of thing. But it's early days, so it's very difficult to do. So that's sort of like that authoring aspect there, which is fairly complex, where you need to author some elements for the systems. You have characters, actions, goals for those characters. You run simulations, you get some feedback from the simulations, and that helps you to build a narrative landscape for your story. In the same way you'll be writing a lot, where you're writing all the different characters, the bits of the characters, all the different elements of the world, and then you just trust the players to go and act nicely, so that they don't break your world. You see, you put some things along the lines so that you can correct things when you go along, but essentially it's a leap of faith that people are going to play nicely with it. It's okay to do it face to face, human to human, but when you try to do it with artificial entities, it becomes much more complex. So the one I wanted to show you, so distributed drama management is something where we actually have a virtual user, and because the user is playing a character, we can assume what that character should be feeling at different points in the story. So we're running a virtual user based on the decision of the player, and we have a sort of like artificial user emotional state. And we're using that as a basis to make decisions, for other characters to make decisions. So if we have a scenario and we've got a scene, we might have a specific emotion as a target for that scene. And based on the decision made by the user, and the other agents make the decision to try to raise to that level of emotion. It's implemented, but it hasn't been tested with a big sort of like set of actions and characters to see how well it would work. But that's theoretically and technically that's what we've been doing. I'll pass you that one. But very quickly, if you think about this, if you've got an agent and these are the decisions possible for the agents, that's our target. So like that's what we're looking for the player in terms of experience. And as you go along, that's the type of actions that can be carried out in terms of distress intensity on a virtual user, for instance. And the system and the characters who choose actions are in line with this. So in the case of this one, for instance, they're probably going to go for either D, E, or G, because it's probably bang on where they want to be for the user experience. But the next action, they're probably going to choose E because E prime, which is subsequent action, will be closer to where we want to be. And if it goes a bit too far, then we'll be looking for actions that are a bit more extreme to try to sort of like go back to the kind of level. Now that brings me to the core of my talk, which is, okay, in AI terms that makes sense, you can do this, but from an authorial perspective, how do you do that when this is dynamic? You can run it, and you can run it again, and you'll have a different result, and you'll have a different set of actions. So there is an idea of how you're going to represent it, how you can feed back to an author until the author is happy with the outcomes and the various ways. So it's earlier work. So if you think about our system, that's my last slide, right? and so like how technical it is to edit those things. At the moment we use XML, which is absolutely not writing, the right medium for writing, okay? And that's kind of like, well, that's the user, that's a visualization tool, but that's sort of like represent what we've got. And ideally, what we'd like is creative colleagues and collaborators to actually just focus on this, the story world and the assets, and automate most of this, or put it in the background so people don't have to worry about it. And that's quite complicated, but that's what we'd like to do. Sort of focus for future years in research again to try to get some funding towards working in collaboration with creative people, with writers, to try to do just that. Given that we've already got all of that, but we need to sort of like get the link between people. So, I'll go quickly through this. That was a rich picture that Neil got from people who run the LARP last year on their process to do a LARP. And we're using this as a template for the authoring of synthetic actors for our system. So where I basically go from developing your ideas, brainstorming how you to do it, define scenario, not write a scenario, but define different scenarios that you're going to use, and sort of like do some simulation, a lot of feedback, and then try to go towards building something where you're quite happy that's going to be ready for user testing and user presentation. So basically, focus for the user, for the author on the experiential feedback, pacing, timing, the emotional trajectory, and let the system do the rest. That is the stuff that is a bit more complicated, and get the system to actually give to you that kind of feedback, but in a way that is usable and you can work with, and that's not quite easy at that stage. Right. So I've done my. I've used my time. I was last year doing that lab, and I think, from our perspective, lab is very much what we would like to be able to do, but with digital characters and synthetic actors. It might take us some time. And we've been working on this for about 10 years now, but it might take us more time to do it, but at least I think it's a very interesting areas to be looking into. And I think within the next maybe 3, 4, 5 years, we'll be at a level where we actually have something that we can really use with writers to be able to develop some stuff of consistency, something very interesting. So that's